Welcome to our first flipped classroom lesson. The idea of these lessons is for you to watch at home or at an appropriate time during the school day. This is the PowerPoint or the notes that I would present to you. You start to understand the basics at home, and then when you come to class, we'll do more practice and application. By the end of that lesson, done at home and in class, you should have more time for interaction with your peers, more time to collaborate with me, and hopefully feel a lot more confident going in the direction that we'll be heading. Now, we're going to start with the SOAPS model, which, as you can see, is a foundation for completing a rhetorical analysis. Now, as we start with this, let's understand why I'm going to teach you the SOAPS model. First off, this was actually designed by College Board, the people who run your AP test. So they created the SOAPS model to help you understand the rhetorical situation of a specific text. They want you to analyze the interaction between the speaker and the writer. They can be two different concepts. They can be the same, depending the at least genre. They want you to understand the interaction between the reader and the audience. Again, two separate concepts. And the subject that helps to guide our text. So we'll start with understanding what a rhetorical analysis is. This is your second question that will appear on the AP exam for your free response questions. And as you can see, the definition's right there. Essentially, you are going to analyze the diction and the attitude, the tone, towards a specific topic. Now, we're not interested in what the author is actually saying. We are not analyzing plot. We are not analyzing a summarization. What you're looking at is how the writer was able to convey certain points. Now, AP language is primarily nonfiction, and so we'll be analyzing prose. And the SOAPS model is not just something that you can do here in AP language. This could follow you into AP Lit. This can follow you into any of your future language arts adventures. First thing we'll look at, or at least some of the concepts that we'll be looking at, you'll examine speeches in this class, historical documents, autobiographical works, essays, and narratives. All of these 5 different models of prose writing are designed to be nonfiction. Can they be fiction? Absolutely. Have we seen the AP language exam use fiction pieces? Yes, we have. However, probably 97% of the time, maybe even more than that, you'll see it being nonfiction. The world around you is what we're concerned with. The communication, the language, all of the things that surround us is what we're really, really going to examine. Now, let's start with the basics. This is David Holeaf. He provided a rhetorical framework diagram that we were able to follow. So here's what it looks like, and I do apologize for these over here, the why, what, and how being kind of condensed. Some of the other images just weren't working, and I went with the best one I could find. So we're going to start from the bottom all the way up to the top. Now you'll see we're starting here with surface features. Diction, syntax, imagery, and figurative language. These are all the basics. When you're analyzing any form of rhetorical analysis, I want to look at the specific surface ideas that you can pick up on. Now, tone's not here because tone is much more difficult to discern. I can understand the type of words that were being used. I can review the structure. I can easily point out figurative language, similes, and metaphors, and alliteration, or sensory details such as imagery. These are how everything has come together. Now you're going to see there are arrows that connect each one. So these 4 elements are all dependent on the organization and structure and form. How it is presented does matter. Now, if I'm writing a war story, was it first person? Was it third person? Was it chronological? Was it out of order? Are there flashbacks? How does that all come together? And are any of these 4 elements part of it? So these are how it all comes together, these 5 boxes right here. Now, as we start to move up, we're moving into the what is taking place. Sorry about that. The what is the argumentative triad that you have dealt with. Now you can see I have logos, ethos, and pathos. All of these 3 are my appeals. Having said that, tone is part of this. You have to be able to register the tone in order to really understand what the author is attempting to accomplish. Think back to Mike Royko. He was intentionally really sad, dark, very depressing at the beginning, and then slowly, after he has won you over with Leroy Bailey, he wants to make you angry. And part of that was using these 3 different features in order to expand on that. Now again, these are the what. So if these are how it all comes together, these are telling you what is going on. This is what I want to accomplish. But that's not enough. I need to go up one more level to the rhetorical situation. And now I'm going to answer why. Now these are the 3 that you want to focus on very, very explicitly. I need to understand the purpose. Why did they choose to write that? Why is it so important? Not only that, but I need to analyze the audience. You and I are not the intended audience. And so having that in mind, I need to take the intended audience and I need to move it into what they were thinking at that time frame, how they would respond. Is that part of the purpose? Think to Royko. 1973, we're not the intended audience. But in 1973, we needed to make a change. We needed to help Leroy Bailey and all the other soldiers who were not getting the support that they needed. The audience at that time was supposed to have a national outcry. They were supposed to respond because that was his goal. Now, this final box up here, this exigence, this is what we call the occasion. And so this is the entire framework for why all of this even exists. Exigence is the why and what happened to even cause an author to write. Was it Leroy Bailey not getting medical attention, or was it the VA refusing to pay? Which one would have caused him more grievance? Which one would have made him respond? And when you take that into consideration, suddenly the why becomes much more clear. And all of it, again, depends on each one of these factors. This is essentially the SOAPS model in all essence. It is the SOAPS model, but it looks much bigger, a little bit more scary. Don't let it scare you. Don't let it override. You naturally do a lot of this. It's just putting it into a flow chart that might be easier for you to understand. Now, the key understanding, everything is connected. When we started talking about Mike Royko, the first thing I did was start pointing out different words. And why was it not this word? Why was it not that word? You have to think back to that basic commercial I talked about. If you have a blind person who is sitting in the middle of a town square with a sign that says, "I'm blind, please help," and no one's donating, we have to ask ourselves why. And if someone changes that sign to say, "It's a beautiful day, but I can't see it," it has the exact same meaning, but something has changed. There is a huge different impact, and suddenly the audience, the people who are going to walk by this, are going to see that and they're going to respond. We have to put into perspective the ideas that we're really wanting to get across. Now, the next thing I want you to think about with key understandings, you are always going to be looking to answer 3 very specific questions. The first one, what? What elements do you see in action? Is it alliteration? Are we seeing any form of simile or metaphor? Are you just noticing something about the diction or the tone? What do you see taking place? The next question, why? If I am attempting to use connotative diction, am I using emotional words? Why? Why would I choose words that have such positive or negative meanings? Why would I even intentionally do that? And then finally, of course, how? How does it further the intent of the writer? How does choosing anything make this piece something bigger than what it originally was? Now, when we look at these 3 questions, you have to really understand the big goal. I don't need you to tell me if something is being described or if something is being explained. I'm probably picking up on that. The idea of this class is to explore the basic understanding that language is a political agenda. Language is always chosen intentionally. If I wanted someone to feel something, I would choose the word that would trigger an emotional response. I would say, like to my son, if he was 15 or 16 and he was failing a class, but I wasn't getting through to him, I might say that I'm disappointed. I'm not upset. Upset and disappointed are two very different words, and with connotations with children, disappointed is so much heavier. Now, this next bullet point, when you're analyzing, you are not going to tell me that a writer is attempting to describe. He is not attempting to explain the situation or to show. When you think about Mike Royko, it is not to show me that the Veterans Administration was not taking care of its soldiers. It was not to explain the hardships of Leroy Bailey. Those are really, really limited, and they're really dependent on the reader. You are the reader. You are not the audience. So you want to dig deeper. You really want to start using any and all content knowledge from across the spectrum. Use your APUSH, use your AP Chem, use just any knowledge that you have of reading the news. And I know it's a hard thing to ask, but if you have the ability, definitely maybe try to watch the news one day or read headlines and just try to stay in tune with what's taking place around the world around you. The idea is, again, approach these challenges with more confidence. The only way to do that, of course, is to really build up your knowledge and to really explore. Now, terms to know and understand. There is exigence, back from David Holeaf's chart. Exigence, again, is the reason or the occasion that prompted the writer to write. So it's everything. This piece only exists because of this one scenario. So again, you'll see Holeaf ensures that you do follow that SOAPS model, but it's providing you cues to remember what you can analyze. It's much bigger than just diction, tone, and syntax. You remember figurative language is part of those elements. You remember that you could approach argumentative strategies like the logic, the facts or statistics. You can focus on the authority matter that's being presented, or even just how the audience is going to react. It's a reminder. So let's start with the SOAPS model. There are 5 aspects to analyze. So from David Holeaf's big rhetorical diagram framework, we're going to bring it down to just 5. The first one is your S. It's our subject, it's the general topic, it's the idea that the writer is describing. Our O is the occasion. This is essentially the exigence. The next one is A. It's the specific audience that the writing is directed towards. O and A are the 2 hardest. And part of it is just the biggest conference I'll have about those 2 is just I can't figure out who they are. I don't know much about that time frame. There's a lot of issues that can come about with the O and the A. You have to use any context knowledge you have, and if you don't have that, you need to start thinking about plausibility. If I'm reading a piece from 1973, hopefully you have enough to think that there was a war taking place, maybe not a specific war, but you knew a war. You might want to think about who would be reading this in 1970. Would it be just, and consider the place where it was published. It's in a newspaper. Is it in a column? If it's an op-ed, opinion editorial, they're going to have specific followers. So that might be something to think about. You have to kind of go outside that box. The P is our purpose. It's the reason for writing. And finally, S is our speaker's characteristics, attitudes, view, or persona. So we'll start with the basics. Let's look at subject. Again, it's our main subject. It's the general topic, the idea that the writer is describing. This whole concept is to make sure that you have understood the main point. Now, I want you to think back to Mike Royko. I intentionally made sure that you focused all of your energy and all of your efforts onto to Leroy Bailey. I'm sorry. I wanted you to stay with him. But was he really the basic subject? Or was he a vehicle? Did he help make sure you understood that the subject was actually the VA refusing to pay for this surgery? We have to keep our knowledge and our emotions in check at times, and no matter how much I feel for Leroy Bailey, I have to understand that this article was written with the intent to make you angry at the VA. With that understanding, you know that the Veterans Administration is actually my subject. They are my target. Now, the next letter is the occasion, our O. This again is the reason for writing. It takes into account the time and space of the piece. We look at it being published in the 1970s. We look at it being published in the 1940s. And again, we use those context clues. Now again, with Royko's A Faceless Man's Plea, we have to really consider this is 1973. We are at the height of the Vietnam, or not the height, but we're at a point of the Vietnam War where our soldiers are coming home. Some of them are getting support, some of them are being forgotten about. There's a lot of different factors. But in 1973, I have Leroy Bailey, a 26-year-old man who was in the Vietnam War for 1 month, who is asking for a jaw. He's not asking for anything cosmetic or for any sort of understanding. He just wants that jaw. Having that said, the VA refuses to pay. Now I have my reason for writing. I want to cause a public outcry. I want to make it where my readers help Leroy Bailey. And that changes it. It's not just to explain or to show you what Leroy Bailey's life is like. Now I want to improve his life. And now I have that ability. Your next one is the audience. And so you'll see I have this and this does not. So let's focus on our positives. When we analyze audience, it's the specific audience that it was intended for. It's who it was written for, who was listening to the speech, or who would have been impacted the most. This is the toughest one because if it's a speech, it's pretty easy to discern who would be there, but you may not be able to understand why they were there in the first place. They might have just been in passing. Now, this does not take any reader into that scope of thinking. You are the reader, and you are not the intended audience. Therefore, the point is mute. You cannot allow yourself to become the person that it's about. So with Royko, and I kept hinting at it, and I know a lot of you really picked up on that hint. But if you were the reader, 1973, you weren't born yet. I wasn't born yet. So there's nothing you or I could have done. 1973, we needed people who could write, who could get more attention. It was all designed for them. It was their intent to read that. It was their response that was needed. And so just remember, you and I, we're not important when we're analyzing. We are important in every other aspect, but when we're analyzing, we have to remove ourselves from that equation. Our next one is the big one. It's purpose. And so it's our purpose, it's our reason, it's our intent. And I do apologize that I put the same word here and here, but really purpose is kind of the big word that I write as comments. So here's the essential lesson. It's the goal of the writer. You have to ask yourself, why'd they bother writing it in the first place? Why would they even attempt to put pen to paper? So purpose, I have to go back and I have to look at my occasion. I have to go back and I have to look at my audience. If I'm thinking about Mike Royko, 1973, after 5 years, this American soldier is not getting the medical attention he needs, I need to take into account my audience. My audience maybe reads the Chicago paper, maybe are anti-war, pro-war, doesn't matter. I have to take into account what was going on, who would read it, and then I have to think about my goal. With Royko's Faceless Man Plea, it has nothing to do with you wanting to feel bad for Leroy Bailey. It has nothing to do with causing people to change their mind about the war. All Royko wanted you to do was to help out our soldiers, target the VA who was not supporting them at that time frame. And so we really have to understand the goal. It goes above describing, it goes above explaining, it goes above showing. Those verbs tend to be pretty limited. Now, finally, you are going to look at speaker. And speaker includes characteristics, so certain word choices that they would use, or attitude, the views, bias that they might present, subjective thoughts, and then the persona. Going back to Mike Royko, just because we've read it, and that's the only reason I keep referencing it, when we talk about our speaker, think about how that article is structured. We have the caps, all the capitalization in between certain sections, and that was designed to elicit a tone shift. That is something you can examine. You can also look at the choice of the speaker. At the beginning of the article, instead of just saying Leroy Bailey was 21, came from Maine, and had been in Vietnam, he was much more specific. He had just turned 21. He was in Vietnam for only 1 month, and he came from a broken family in Maine. There are certain choices, and so you can think about the characteristics. There's the idea of maybe making us feel a little guilty, maybe adding sympathy or pity. You can think about the attitude. He had one attitude towards Leroy Bailey, much more sympathetic, much more friendly. And then when I got towards the VA, become much more pointed, much more angry and hostile. And of course, bias. It was pretty obvious he was not on the side of the Veterans Administration. But the idea is when we analyze our speaker, what is the major intent? Where are we going with this? Now, the Breakfast Club, here's your next slide. We're not going to analyze this online. In fact, when you come to class, we're not watching it, but we'll talk about the SOAPS model in application by using the Breakfast Club. This movie, just as a quick synopsis, took place in the 80s, and there were 5 students who had a Saturday detention, and you had, throughout the whole movie, they had to find a way to put all of their differences aside and kind of come together. By the end, they found something that brought them all together, and they left a note for the teacher who was watching them during that detention. That is what we'll be analyzing with our SOAPS model. So it's just the letter, we're not watching it. Having said all that, we'll come back to the SOAPS model pretty frequently. There will be audience analysis. We'll be focusing on purpose a lot with our discussions. I will make sure that by the time you get to a timed write, you feel very, very confident and very, very secure. So I do appreciate you watching this. Please know that you should probably print out the notes and have them in your binder or something along those lines where you can keep them as a nice reference. You will have some form of like a 1-question quiz over something that I said. Nothing horrible, it's just a question of if you were listening, this is going to easily stand out. So please be aware if you need to go back and rewatch this because it was just kind of running in the background. You do that. Have a great evening, and I will see you guys in class.